You're doing intros and all that again, right?
Yeah. So how's it going, brothers? Today, I am happy to bring us together again for our second episode of Perspective. A lot of people kind of want to know what perspective is, and perspective is an opportunity for Black men to offer insight and their perspectives on the world we live in. So today, we're going to be talking about a couple different things. Obviously, we want to make sure that people are aware that some of this stuff can be triggering, and we want to offer a trigger warning to be sure that if there's something that bothers you, feel free to log off or mute yourself. We have 4 different brothers we have 5 brothers today that are going to offer their perspective on what's going on in America, culturally, politically, educationally, healthcare wise, etc. I'll start with myself. My name is Dewan Bennett. I am a licensed professional counselor. I've been practicing for over 13 years. I have a private mental health practice here in Dallas, in North Dallas, focusing on trauma, couples, depression, anxiety, things of that nature. Jacoby.
I'm Jacoby Bradley. I'm a law enforcement officer. I have about 6 years of experience in the field. I'm just here to offer opinions on law enforcement perspectives and just general life perspectives.
My name is Parrish Gary. I'm an administrator in higher education in the Northern California region.
Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Galloway. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist intern. You can find me at Dewan Bennett Counseling. I'm also a life coach and a board member of Destiny's Giving Hand nonprofit.
My name is E. I've been in law enforcement going on 14 years, and I'm here to just get my perspective on being Black in law enforcement and also growing up in low economic areas.
All right. I wanted to get this started and just kick it off. We're going to go right into it. So what are your thoughts on being Black in America?
This one, I had to think about it for a minute. Dewan posed the question because there's so many layers to it, right? Do we think like we talk about the here and the now, and are we thinking about the context of history or what? But for myself, it's a sense of pride to be Black in America, to be a Black male in America, to say that I've seen 36. You're so excited about the possibilities for yourself and your peers when you have the abilities to get out of certain situations. We just happen to be lucky because there's a lot of brothers and sisters that come from where we came from, the inner cities of Jersey, the Bay, Chicago, that just didn't have that ability or access or whatever it is to get out of there, because there's a lot of things that are out of our hands, I would say. And we talk about systematic racism and systematic oppression all the time. And I think the world is finally getting to see what we've been a victim to or privy to for hundreds of years. I believe that being Black is a beautiful thing. You can go anywhere in the world and you will see a part of Black, well, I'll say Black because we're talking about a Black American culture anywhere. You will see our sneakers, our haircuts, our music. Anywhere in the world, you will see things that reflect being Black in America, and it's a sense of pride that I have. But that as much as you assimilate into whatever status or whatever rooms you're in, there's always this barrier, and there's something that slaps you in the face or puts you back in your place to know that you are, I guess, what the system thinks less than. We talked about that 3/4 of a person the last time we spoke. Whether that be what they call the war on drugs, which incarcerated a lot of our fathers and uncles and men in our communities, or the people that were addicted to those drugs. Or we talk about food deserts in our community, or we talk about the lack of educational resources in our communities. There's so many things that are barriers for us. When I see a person that's successful and they're Black, man, I can get a smile on my face because I knew how hard it was for him or her to get to where they are. It's very difficult. Just like all of you guys been through trials and tribulations that nobody can fathom, just like myself, and it's difficult. So when I see a Black person, they doing something good, and I'm like, man, he or she is doing a thing, and you get a smile on your face. But then there's times like now to where we're talking about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, whatever it is, Tamir Rice, all these deaths and killings, it hurts your heart because those people weren't as lucky as I am or as us to see another day or to achieve things that they wanted to achieve. But I wanted to use this baseball analogy while I summed it up. We always hear people say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or whatever that's supposed to mean. But I always use baseball as an analogy because, we supposed to start at home plate and trying to get a hit. But for people of color, we don't have a bat. We don't got the cleats. We don't have anything. So we're starting way behind. And for a lot of people that are not of the Black culture or community, they started on second base, third base. They had things set in place for them. They had access to the greatest schools. They had great access to jobs. They had access to a number of things that we did not have access to. And we're starting behind the 8 ball in a lot of ways. But to be Black in America, man, it's not an easy thing, but it's something that you love.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm reminded by, I think of J. Cole and just the song or the line that he says is beauty in the struggle. So for me being Black, I just think of all of the different shades of Black. When I think about all of our different struggles and the different things that we have, I appreciate them. You can go from a circle of lawyers and see their unique set of skills to just survive and make it and how their mind is sharp, all the way back to the hood and see your local hustler and his skill set on how he comes from the elements of survival and his mind and how it thinks. And I just think that when I'm thinking of being Black, I love the fact that no matter if it's higher class or lower class, you can find in the middle of all of us that hunger, that will to succeed, that dedication, that just attitude of resiliency. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I think about in Black people is resiliency. And you don't have to go, like I said, to the hood or to, Wall Street to find that. It's right there in front of you, no matter what, amongst all of those different people. So that's one of the biggest things that I think about when it comes to being Black. I think also, you can get a small grain of just our culture in the underdog, right? Because of the different things, like Jeff said, us feeling like there's a struggle, us feeling like we have to overcome something in general. Anytime you watch football, baseball, basketball, Barack Obama winning the presidency, it's one of those things where you just automatically know that like this person is an underdog. They had to come from a certain type of struggle to get to where they're at. So you just appreciate it off the top of your head, no matter what. So for me, it's always going to be built around strength, resiliency, and the fact that no matter where our class is at in the world, we all share that same common bond of just trying to make it and being resilient no matter what.
Hey, I'm E, and I have a mixed feelings, about being Black in America. And the reason why I got mixed feelings is because being Black in America, right, it have two different perspectives to it. You got the ones, and majority of us as being Black, we come from, quote unquote, the hood. And then the few that, that come from, great areas, they have a whole different perspective. So, me, I'm going to say the first, about 22 years of my life, it was, basically being brought up in the hood. And then from there, another, last 14, 15 years, it's like, basically being, brought up or being, raised in the suburbs in a sense. So, like growing up in the hood, as a Black man, I mean, it's tough, not only if you're fighting against your peers, you fight against people that's, in other areas from gun violence, gang violence. In addition to that, you also have, the police brutality or whatnot. There's no opportunities at all, in the hood. Nowadays, when I'm back in certain cities, I'm gonna say Chicago, you go to McDonald's, you see grown people working at McDonald's. They look like they're 40 and 50 years old. Back in the day, it's like you seen more younger people working in there. So now it's like, the older people are taking the jobs from younger people. So now the younger people's left out on the streets, saying with no opportunities. in addition to that, it's like, growing up in the hood is like you in survival mode. You know what I'm saying? It's like every day you constantly fearing for your life. I know more people that's good people that caught gun charges. And just because, they have the mindset of I'd rather get caught with it than get caught without it. It's like being a fear of your life. And it's like those officers that work those areas, they don't understand, the struggle of actually, growing up in those areas and being a fear of your life every day. But then, on the flip side, growing up in the suburbs, it's like you got more opportunities. You have more resources. So it's almost like there's really no point that for you to fail at life, because you don't have to wake up in fear every day. You don't have to carry a gun. You can go to a rec center, to play basketball. Most of the places in the hood, they got outside courts. 9 times out of 10, you out there long enough, it's gonna be some type of gunshots that ring out. So that's why I have mixed feelings of being Black in America, because again, if you come from the hood, you treat it one way, your life experiences or growing up, you're gonna feel one way mentally. But then if you're out in the suburbs, you treat it one way, you have more opportunities and resources.
I think you all, talked about some very valid points, because what happens is that we get to a point in our lives where we're looking at ourselves sometimes from the same mirror that others are looking at us. But go ahead, P.
So I'm going to come from a very different perspective because, and listen to everybody's response. It's a balance. So I understand there's a self-awareness, there's a resiliency in it. But at the end of the day, I see also as being Black in America as myself as sometimes a target. So, and the reason why I say that is because it's 2020. In history, you look at Emmett Till, that was like 1955. You look at the 16th Street Baptist burning, bomb burning, that was like 57 or 67. So you're only looking at between 60 years ago, which means our parents saw that or our grandparents saw that. So with those things taking place and a lot of these things happening to people, not because they did something wrong, it was just the color of their skin. It had nothing to do with their actions. It had nothing to do with how they carried themselves. And so I then translate that to now. Even though we ascend to great positions and we handle ourselves accordingly, there's still things that people will pick apart and people will kind of judge you on. And it's not because of your actions, it's not because of what you said, but it's because of the color of your skin, which is something you don't control. So a lot of times I'm thinking, how do you move in this space, or how do you conduct yourself in this space? And if you find that you get accolades, you may be a little bit more accepted, but then make a wrong turn in those accolades, you're immediately informed like, no, you are a Black dude that made a bad decision. So, and not even that you made a bad decision, that you're just a Black man who did this. Because if somebody else of a different race did it, it's not seen the same way. So I see sometimes that it's that being Black in America, you're kind of a target. And we need to have that self-awareness. And I think that it makes us make wiser decisions on how we conduct things and how we look to make changes. Comes with a need of a lot of resiliency. I'll echo what Mr. Bradley said, that we have to be aware that, we made strides to get where we're at. And so we have to take advantage of those strides and use our resources to continue to be where we are. So to sum it up, yeah, it's a lot of self-awareness. It's a lot of balance, because there's those good and those bads. And as Mr. Galloway said, there's a lot of times that you see what you have done being used for other things within, pop culture. So you're like, hey, I'm proud to be Black because I see how it's contributed to the overall masses and what we do. But then at the same time, you got to be aware, you got to be smart, and you can't just, I guess, exist freely in certain spaces. So that's my comments, sir.
You know what? I think it's a very interesting discussion, because I do think as a Black man, Genesis 1:27 says God created men in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. So I've always been proud of who I am, because I look at myself as a reflection of who God wanted me to be. For me, sometimes needing glasses, for me being bow-legged, for me being slender. I think those are all things that God wanted for me. So I've always embraced it and been proud of it. I've always been fully proud to be who I am and be a Black man. And America is my home. It's the country I was born in. I haven't lived anywhere else. So I've always been a proud Black man living in America. But I think sometimes that's where the disconnect is. I'm a Black man living in America as if I'm a second-class citizen. And so many times we've seen examples of that throughout history. And even now, we have, a social justice movement going on that is very powerful and is causing a lot of companies and a lot of people to look at their own selves and look at their own sense of racism or discrimination that they're engaging in. But I also see with that some people who are angry and some people who are just evil because they see changes happening and they don't want that change to happening. So I wake up to images on the news of Black men being hung from trees and Black women being hung from trees, public lynchings to say that, hey, we don't want change. We don't want you guys to be equal, to news clippings of people, screaming and hollering with so much rage and anger and calling us the N-word for things, again, that we haven't done for them. A lot of their beliefs about what a Black person is are not beliefs that they've encountered for themselves. It's about what they have been taught to believe about Black people. A lot of them don't have relationships with people like us who, any one of us would give anyone something off their back if they ever asked for it. If ever someone was in need, we would do what we need to take care of them. We're all in roles of public service. We're either in mental health, we're either educators, or we're in law enforcement. So think we are in careers where we chose to help people. And I think part of that Black experience is we love everyone. We're very empathetic and sympathetic. We understand and recognize that sometimes my brother may need help, my sister may need help, my neighbor may need help. So, to answer the question, as a Black man, I've been very proud of who I am and my experiences. I just wish that other people would recognize and understand that we're all in this together, and we have to not look at race as a sense of difference. I mean, it's a difference, but race is a construct, right? It's a construct that was created simply to understand racism. It's not genetically formed. It's not biologically made. It's a construct that's made socially by people. So recognize that we're different. Yes, that's okay. But just like every box, every color in the crayon, we all have purpose. So that's kind of what race means to me. As we begin to segue into our next question, I want to ask you guys, what conversations are you having with your family and children about police brutality and racism, as well as whiteness?
Well, when I'm talking to my nephews and some of my mentees, I try to explain to them the importance of, not really hanging outside if you live in the hood. And the reason why I say that, because, saying that community got a target on its back, one, by gun violence, gang violence, and then not only that, police violence. You got police officers that specifically target those areas, and they have a purpose of when they in those areas, patrolling those areas. They in those areas to actually shut down the crime. So if you in those areas, right, they don't know the difference between good and bad, because that area is so highly populated with so much bad that basically, from a law enforcement standpoint, it's like everybody bad. You may have this 13-year-old, a kid that's really a good kid, but he's out in that hood. Now he's considered as just like, the 18-year-old kid that's in the hood, shooting guns, from a law enforcement standpoint. Also, I tell them that whenever you do get encountered with the police, give them the utmost respect. I call this thing called, 15 minutes of fame. Make them feel like they're the most famous person to you. Saying, be very respectful, because the more respect you give them, the more you listen, the quicker you can probably get that situation to stop. In addition to that, ensure them that you respect them. Throw out stuff like, hey, my uncle a police officer. Hey, my mentor a police officer. And the reason why, what happened is, when they catch that, right, and they hear that, first thing that particular officer do is he'll ease up, because he don't know who you know. And he know that if he, attack you or deal with you or handle you a certain way, he don't know who your family member may be, or who your mentor may be, or who your uncle may be. He don't know. So immediately, right, when you ensure him, like, look, I have respect for you because I have a mentor, or I have an uncle, or I have a, a father, somebody in law enforcement. That officer that's handling you, he gonna ease up. He gonna start trying to pay more attention to who you are and start listening to you versus not listening to you and just almost violating your rights in a sense.
So I'll start with a personal question I was asked around this topic. One time my son asked, "Are we ever going to be okay?" And mind you, he's he's a teenager just getting into this world. And yes, he's lived a life where he hasn't had to be around certain elements to create, uh, a uncomfortable situation. But in general, him asking, "Are we ever going to be okay?" just leads me to believe, like, is anything ever going to change? So a lot of times when with my son, we have big picture perspective before we dwindle down to the exact question of, what is police brutality or racism or whiteness. And a lot of times it's about just space and survival. Now, mind you, I use the word survival because he's maneuvering in a space in various locations, whether it be school or whether it be just in society at times, where it's not designed for our success. So again, I have to teach him survival skills on how to engage with individuals and how to watch people's mannerism, or how to, start to pay attention to what's going on around, so that he can remove himself from those situations. That's a conversation I have with my family in general. And the reason why I use survival over live in a, live, or how to live in this space, is because you you can't be comfortable. He can't be relaxed, because at any moment, as we've been seeing throughout the past couple of months, you can be targeted for anything. So when we're looking at the idea of police brutality and whiteness and those conversations, I understand where Eve's coming from, but then the question to my head is why? Like, why can't I be approached in the same manner that you want to be approached? So giving you that due diligence of I respect you, I don't want to have to give you my whole accolades or who I may know. Why can't you just approach me in that manner? And so I have to teach my son how to maneuver around that. And so those are the conversations we have, and they're ongoing. They don't stop, because there's always new situations. And at times they can be very uncomfortable, because you have to then say at some points, you just can't be around those individuals, or you just can't go in that area. And that's the sad piece about that, because you may have friends that are there that you connect with, but nope, because of what happens, you can't be around that. So those are the conversations that we have. Even when it comes down to being around individuals that do not exactly say they have any racist tendencies, but just understanding microaggressions. So understanding when somebody says or gestures in a certain way, you have to then make sure that you're on the understanding of where they're coming from. And that's hard to do with a lot of different kids, depending on their age level. I believe last week, our last conversation, a gentleman was talking about his daughter and her being like, safe in her space, and she's a little kid. So understanding those kind of things makes these conversations hard, because how do you explain to a child that you have to understand these struggles at a 5-6 year old age? So again, these conversations are hard. I don't think they should just be one-time runoffs. I think that a family should continue to embrace this seriousness in understanding race, and it's just hard to do, and it's draining. And that's just my perspective.
All right. I mean, this is an interesting question, and this is perspective. So I'm gonna try to get comfortable with you guys as we move through this, or I give my statement on it. It's a difficult situation because I have a unique balance that I have to go through to get this done, right? Like, on one hand, my actual occupation is a police officer. On the other hand, my daily life, when I wake up, when I go to sleep, when I close my eyes, before I put on the uniform, after I put on the uniform, it's the perspective of a Black man, because I'm Black first. So the type of conversations that I have are more or less kind of like a balancing act. I have to get people to see that I definitely understand what's going on in America, but I also have to get them to understand that, you know, there are some things that I would like them to keep in mind as we move through certain topics. Or why I have a perspective on these things is because I have a front row seat at the things that sometimes we just leave to perception as Black culture and Black people. A lot of the things that we perceive aren't necessarily too far off, but for us to understand them in a real more in-depth way is kind of like the type of conversations that I'm having with people. Another way that I look at this whole situation is that, like, I have kids. We all pretty much have kids, or godparents, or are responsible for children. And I can say for the most part around us is that our children are in a pretty good place of social privilege and economic privilege. So just like Parrish, a lot of the times you have to have conversations with your kids about things that they wouldn't necessarily be aware of at all, because of the simple fact that by us being in the circles that we're in, us holding the professional titles that we hold, us just having the, you know, building our monetary power that we have attached to our names, people think, or sometimes we forget or think that we might be exempt from certain type of categories, or people having certain types of perceptions of us. So a lot of the times we have to have conversations just based on the fact that sometimes you might not understand how people treat you, or why people do you a certain way, or why we still have to hold our professionalness, or hold our, you know, manners, or just the way that we act in front of certain people because of the color of our skin. And when it comes to police brutality, I have real conversations with my family about police brutality. Sometimes the things that I see on TV are flat out just not right. Sometimes the things that we all see, I'm not going to argue against them at all. Actually, most of the time, the stuff that we see in the news isn't right. And I don't hold back my tongue in any type of way when I have those type of conversations with my family, because I look at myself as being in a position for the Black community where I need to be very honest about what it is that I see out there. If I start making mistakes, or I start trying to give excuses for things that I see, or, you know, my behaviors, then I become less credible. So for me, it's all about my credibility. So when I talk, or when I have discussions about police brutality, if it's wrong, it's flat out wrong. And most of the time, a lot of the things that I'm seeing is due to lack of training. It's also due to people just making bad decisions in the field and flat out being scared. And some of that is just because you're scared of the culture. And we're not going to make excuses for those type of people or those type of actions. Get more involved in the communities that you serve and understand them better, so that you don't go out there and you don't have these certain type of fears when you're in these communities working with them. You know, I mean, we can sit in a barbershop with each other, laugh, yell, and get excited about things that we're seeing. But if certain people that aren't part of our culture come inside of that barbershop, they're going to think they just walked in on a whole hostile argument and that there's about to be a fight to the death. But nah, that's just the way that we chopping it up about our experiences in life, about who's the best at this, who's our favorite basketball player, who's our favorite rappers, culture things, who we want to vote for in politics. It goes from all different types of conversations, but sometimes the way we communicate gets misconstrued by the masses.
Jeff?
Yeah, this is another great question, Dewan. And the conversations that we have amongst ourselves, but the conversations I have like with my younger siblings and then my mentee, because I try to position myself to talk to a lot of young Black men, to understand that for both of them, they're both tall, 6'1", 6'2". My mentee has dreads. My little brother's a tall, slender guy. Something about you is different, whether you think it, people perceive you as different, whether you think that's true or not. Make sure you always watch the room. And I guess that's something that we just do as a people, is watch the room where you are. Just same as when you're interacting with the police, like Eric said, you got to position yourself to where you're not threatening people. And it's unfortunate we have to have that conversation, but it's the same thing of when you get pulled over, make sure you don't reach for nothing, put your hands up on the wheel, you know, all those kind of small things that we talk about, that we have to teach our youth at early ages. Like Parrish was just talking about with our good friends, Patrick's daughter. She's like 5 and she's having a conversation about her hair. So our kids have to grow up so much faster. So what we've been talking about in my family group is, if there's something that you want to say right now, this is the time to say it, because we have a lot of ears and eyes right now. Because if you have something that you feel or you need to be that needs to be said, go ahead and say it, because people are listening to you. And if you don't know how to articulate that, then talk to somebody, whether that's in your group, to see how to formulate that. Because you do have eyes, you do have social media, you do have news outlets, you have platforms such as this to express those things. And expressing those things are ways that we can get people educated. And also in the process of educating people, we are getting some sense of release and therapy too, because we're getting some of those things off our chest. So that's my spiel.
You know, you brought up something important. You guys spoke to hypervigilance, where, you know, it's a symptom of trauma where we're constantly scanning our environments. It's when we go into restaurants and we try to see who's around, or we walk into a building and we're kind of seeing who's getting on the airport with us and things of that nature. And a lot of that is because we've had to be mindful of who's around us, right, and where we are. A lot of that has been a product of our environments and the areas that we were raised. But a lot of it is that we recognize that sometimes we go into spaces where people don't want us there, and we had to be mindful of that. I remember one day, I think my son was probably 4. I was driving, I was speeding, I got pulled over. The cop pulls me over. My son starts to freak out because he sees, you know, the police sirens and the police coming. And it was a very normal routine. Give me your license, registration, ticket, and go about your business. But after that, I had to stop the car, pull over I remember pulling into a Bank of America parking lot to have the conversation with my son about why he was so scared. And, you know, somebody will say, well, you know, that was a very early discussion, but research shows as early as 3 years old, kids begin to classify other people, whether they view them as safe or unsafe, tall or short, mean or nice. So once kids start to understand and classify, then they must understand that there are some kids that may classify them different simply because of their race. So you need to have that discussion. I wanted my son to recognize and understand that police are safe. I want you to be cautious around police, not fearful. Because if he's fearful around police, then he won't call on them when he needs them to protect him and keep him safe. And I think that's the conversation that we have about race is, you know, make sure that you're cautious, to make sure that you are in a space where you are taking care of yourself. We talked about being emotionally intelligent, being able to manage your feelings and your emotions. What do you do with your fear? I think having that conversation with our kids and our family, our wives, is even more important. What do you do when you're scared? My wife recently told me about a situation where, you know, she was pulled over at gunpoint for speeding with my nephews in the car, and they were in the car just screaming, crying. My wife was just calm because in her mind, you know, like, hey, this is a routine traffic stop. I don't know why you have your gun on me, but here's my information. But my nephews were crying because they thought she was going to be shot. So making sure that we have conversations with our children about what do they do when they're scared, because most of the time when you see someone run, it's their natural instinct, fight, flight, freeze, right? If I've always ran, you know, or flee when something happens to me, that's going to be my response when a police officer comes. If I'm stuttering because you're talking to me, it's because I'm scared, not that I'm lying. So making sure that we're guiding those conversations with our children about race and things of that nature. There's a couple books that I have my son read to make him feel comfortable with being in this game, whether it's Riley, You Can Be Anything, or I Am Magnificent, or Brown Boy, What Can You Be? I think those are all important resources that we have, that we read with our children in order to help our children better recognize and understand the sense of empowerment and self-empowerment and self-awareness. The best thing that you can give to your child is a positive self-esteem, self-awareness, understanding who they are, understanding that, you know, that they, for the most part, they can control themselves, and recognizing that they are somebody, having a sense of a belonging in the world that they live in. So I think those are a lot of the conversations that we have, and recognizing that whiteness it was founded on a sense to try to get, you know, people in Spain and Portugal to create a hierarchy between themselves and their slaves. They wanted to make sure that there was a distinction between them and the people that were serving them. And so always recognize that when you're talking with people about whiteness, or you're talking with people about race, that they have an understanding of how their privilege has contributed to their success. And if they recognize that their privilege has contributed to their success, let's figure out how you can use your privilege to open up the doors for other people who may not have those doors open for them. So as we segue into this next question, guys, I really want you guys to think about this. There has been a lot of talk of police reform. What do you guys think you need to see happen for us to feel safer with police in our communities? We're going to start with Taft.
I think when we talk about what we need to do to feel safer in our communities is obviously we need to have more conversation with the community. It needs to be an included conversation, right? And I use the word conversation as like one of the most important parts. It's got to go both ways. It's not just us talking about our experiences and how we do things as a police officer, but it's more about what is it that the community needs from us, right? Like, when I come home and I talk to you guys about certain stuff, or I talk to my kids or my family about different things, I don't really want to be always in the position as the person giving the direction at that point, especially when I'm learning how I could better serve the community, right? Like, it's not for me to dictate to the community how I'm going to be better off or how my service is going to be better off to them. It's more about me listening. You know, it's like just in a marriage, you got to listen, learn how to compromise, and then find the middle ground. And I feel like that's one of the more important things that we need to do. Also, I mean, I'm not going to just say that law enforcement doesn't have a responsibility in educating the community, because we do. There's some things that just isn't going to change about the way we do our job that doesn't have anything to do with racism or police brutality, but it has everything to do with safety. And those are conversations that you got to have with the community so that they actually understand what you do. At one point in time earlier in my career, I was a guest lecturer at a college, and we talked about why it is that we make certain decisions. I gave examples. I did exercises on those things. And honestly, as I was moving around doing my job as a police officer at that time, I never was questioned about what I did in the community, because the community had an understanding of why I moved the way I moved. I also was able to put people in a position where they were better able to understand why law enforcement does what they do and how they can counteract certain type of perceptions or fears to make the whole transition between both people easier. Because the sad part about it is whether it's based on race, or it's justified, or it's just, you know, racially biased, there is a transaction that happens on both sides between the community and law enforcement when you have that interaction. There's certain moves, certain gestures, certain things that happen that create perceptions for law enforcement officers. And there's certain moves and certain gestures that police officers do that create certain perceptions. Coming to somebody's car with your hand on your gun might create a certain perception. I always try to be mindful of that, because as Eric may know, when you're wearing a duty belt and your body gets tired and your back is hurting and all the things that happen to us, it's easier to rest your hand sometimes on your gun. It's like literally an armrest. And it somehow, some way, with this old back that we got, it makes your whole back feel just a little bit better for that moment. But in the normal eye of the people standing around me, they might be like, oh shit, who's he about to shoot today? You know? And that's not the perception that I want to put out there, and I don't want people feeling that way. But it's some of those type of conversations that we need to have amongst each other so that everybody kind of understands what we're doing, how we're doing it, and everything that we got going on.
Before we kind of move on to the next person, I kind of wanted to get your insight on this. Explain to us the process of the no-knock warrant. I know we had a murder here in Texas with Breonna Taylor, in which, you know, the police entered her house on a no-knock warrant. Educate us more on that process and kind of how that works.
All right, so
you and E talk about this topic.
Yeah, so I will, you know, push this back and forth between the both of us, because I think with both of our years of experience and stuff, we may have a little bit of different opinions. I think we'll both come to the same point, though. So with the whole no-knock warrant situation and how that all works is that you're going to have to obviously get the warrant. The warrant's got to come from a judge. A judge has to sign off on it. The particulars of what you're doing with that warrant all needs to be included. So if I'm coming to Dewan's house to serve a warrant, I need to say that I'm coming for Dewan. I'm coming to search Dewan's computer. I'm coming to search Dewan's da 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 da. I want access to his full house. I need to include everything that I'm trying to do when I serve this search warrant in that warrant. I also need to articulate why it is that it would need to be a no-knock warrant, because obviously warrants have different levels of service. Some warrants can be served at all at nighttime. Some warrants can be served at any point in time of the day or night. And then you also have, like you said, the special warrant right there where you can request it to be a no-knock, which means that we're going to sneak up on this house, enter by surprise, and try to get everyone that we need in custody by the element of surprise. So all of that has to be included in the warrant and why you need that to be. Maybe you consider this person to be armed and dangerous. Maybe you consider this person to be somebody that's going to flee. But when you're writing all of that information up, typically it goes through the chain of command. If I'm an officer or a detective writing that, that's going to go to my sergeant, who's the next person in line. From there, our lieutenant might want to look over it, or the captain that's over that whole division. Those are just higher level supervisors that are sometimes involved in a loop, because typically they want to know what's going on. They don't want to hear about it on the news or hear about it the next day before they come into work. When all of those things are satisfied, you then take it to the judge, who looks over that, and the judge decides if he wants to approve you being able to serve this warrant or not. Sometimes the judge will see certain things and say, hey, you didn't account for this, so I don't want to approve this warrant. You have to go back in, edit it, or articulate even more why it is that you need those things done for the judge to get your approval. Once you've gotten the approval from the judge on that warrant and you have it at no-knock status, then you can go to someone's house and serve a warrant without actually notifying them that you're there. That's just one situation how it happens, but we also have to remember a team is going to be formed at that point in time. And once that team is also formed, that team is the team that's responsible for executing that search warrant. So if I'm on that team or I'm an officer, all of these details that we've talked about may not necessarily I be privy to, but I am going to know that it's a no-knock. I am going to know who we're coming for, why we're coming for them, and I'm going to be told what my position is. Am I sneaking in through the back door? Am I coming in through the front door? Am I, just holding the perimeter to make sure that the person can't leave with their car out of the block and put us in a high-speed chase or something like that? Those are all information and things that you're going to be given. But by the time it comes back to that team and the officers who are executing that warrant, they're doing a job that was ordered by a judge and approved by a judge and all of their superior officers ahead of them. So the question becomes, how liable are you for serving that warrant when it was executed by a judge? There's a couple of things in your job you really can't escape. And a court order or a judge ordered action is typically going to be one of them. That's one of your highest, most superior things that you're going to have in your career. So at that point in time, if you're on that team, you're going to assume that all of the boxes that you needed to be checked and everything that was important was already accounted for before you even got put in that position. And I'll pass it to Eric for his opinion.
Before I let Eric go in, I think you brought up a great point about the court order and what happens. Even in my field as a mental health provider, if a lawyer subpoenas me and they want me to attend court or they want my records, I don't have to give it to them. I can completely ignore it. But if it's a court order, which means it's by the judge saying, hey, you have to do this, then legally you kind of have no choice, or unless you're willing to face the legal ramifications of that. So that's a great point, bringing into it the court order aspect of it and how pertinent that is into doing your job. What do you have to say in regards to kind of what Jacoby said?
Also, and just to add to what Jacoby said, also with the no-knock warrant, right, you also have to provide like criminal histories of the subjects that you're looking for. Most of the criminal histories that in order to get a no-knock warrant, that person have to be a person with a violent background. They don't just necessarily allow no-knock warrants. Just you to just go in and get somebody because you heard they was doing a lot of nickel and dime and hustling. So that person had to have a violent background, and officers have to basically be aware of that is possible guns inside that location, and that the people inside that location, they'll be willing to actually commit a felony and or assault on a police officer with those guns inside the location. Typically, you would probably end up having somewhat like a confidential informant that that then gave you some great information on that location where you can add inside that warrant. Yes, piggyback to what Jacoby said. Yes, it's several different people that view that warrant. You know, the detective who's basically the lead detective over that particular warrant. He gonna write up the warrant, then it go to his boss, then it go to his boss, then it get over to the judge. But typically, what happened is this. You will start having supervisors or whatnot, right? Because they've been working with, y'all been working together for so many years. They just basically whatever you say, they roll with. It's kind of like they feel like they know you well enough and stuff like that. And so what happened is 9 times out of 10 in this particular situation, I mean, I don't know, but what happened is they probably, signed that particular, the supervisor probably signed that warrant. The judge got it. Ain't no telling what time they went to the judge's house. Half the time, the judges, they'll get called at 2, 3 in the morning, woke up out their sleep, and have to sign a warrant. My thing is, are they really playing, full detail, about what's in that warrant at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning? They got to be back in office at 8 to be on stand, listening to cases all day. So that's like the background of that. So sometimes, I mean, I don't know. I don't have, proven facts, but I'm quite sure some of them judges, they scan through those warrants and they just sign off on them because for one, they probably didn't seen a few warrants from a particular detective, and they like, okay, this guy usually write good warrants. So you didn't develop you didn't develop that history, you didn't develop that fate, with that judge. So after first couple of warrants, next thing you get there, the judge really don't even pay too much attention. They may ask you some questions, pertaining to the warrant. You say yes, that's in there, and then boom, they sign off on it. So when I seen that particular case and I seen how they arrested that officer, in my personal opinion, that was more the political stand, because what's going on is a lot of protests and riotings. So then what happened is police departments in cities, they got to spend a lot of money overtime to pay officers to be out there for those protests or those riots. It was, and me personally, I don't think that particular officer, will probably be charged, with a murder. I mean, convicted, for a murder. I mean, he's charged with it, but not. I don't think he's gonna get convicted. It was just too many people that was involved in that warrant. My thing is, if that guy gonna get charged or convicted, everybody needs to get convicted, from the judge who signed off on it and the supervisors.
All right. And and I think that's a great perspective to bring to the table, because we as citizens or civilians kind of have a belief about how this process works. But you guys who, are in law enforcement, you see day to day the process of getting these things done, and recognizing it's not just about the officers or law enforcement that needs to change. It's the whole structure or the system itself that has allowed some of these things to happen. P, what do you have to say to offer to this discussion?
It's another great question that I can go on for a while. Now, I'm not a police officer at all, and I don't have any law enforcement background. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm only providing my perspective, so I wanted to make sure that's known. So in general, I think from top down, you need to change diversity. I think if you had leadership that had more diversity in it, it'd make a difference in how decisions are made, because now you have the various perspectives that people can give from the different cultures that will be affected by the policing itself. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, as we say, this is a systematic situation. It's ingrained in the system how things are done. So I think that a review of that needs to take place, which comes down to rewriting some of the ways that these no knocks or whatever takes place needs to change. I think you need to look at some training. And of course, you probably need to look at some more communication. I'm only saying those things because, as both of the gentlemen that are in law enforcement spoke on, that the person writing or approving the no knock will probably never be the one touching the door. So that's one thing that came to my mind. So you're saying you're completing a task that somebody has no connection to is giving you. So that's one thing that I'm thinking about. And the second thing is when it comes down to training. So we've seen how certain individuals, Caucasian individuals, are treated that did some pretty some pretty strong things in a community. The gentleman, I was trying to get his name, that just did the thing in the South where he torched the church. I forget this young man's name. Anyway, since that's I'm sorry about that. But when they went to arrest him, knowing that he was armed and dangerous, he walked out. Nobody kicked in really a door. Nobody shot up the house. He walked out and they walked him out. So you're telling me that a no knock, you can't find, and as was alluded to, enough surveillance to understand what's going on in that house before you go in, so that when you enter, you don't have to immediately start shooting. And if they are posing a threat, I think that's where the preparedness comes in. Again, we've seen an individual walk out knowing they just committed a gruesome crime. They walked out. So there's some type of training that needs to take place in order to make sure those things aren't happening. Again, I'm going to preference to say I'm not a police officer. I don't know what's going on in their thoughts when those things happen because I don't live that lifestyle. So I could just be talking from a civilian standpoint, which I will admit. But again, I think there's a lot of structural things that can change in order to have the people who live in those communities feel safe, because that's what the question was regardless to see a change and make people feel safer. So again, I'll reiterate diversity from leadership down, looking at how the laws are written and who's actually going to be completing the task in those warrants or those no knocks, if that's the focus topic right now. Again, and the last part I'll say that was brought up, criminal history. So if you have a understanding of a certain type of criminal, you're going to probably engage with them a certain type of way. So I think that's another thing that people need to understand and look into, because as alluded to in other conversations that we have, just because a person is a certain way and understanding where they come from in that mindset, because we also talked about mental health in regards to that, as something that can be played into all this. So that's where I feel you can have a change take place for people to feel more safe with police. And I think those things will probably make a significant change on how the society will accept police officers. Oh, and there's the last one. And talking about diversity, you also got to have people who want to be in those roles feel that they can be accepted in those roles. So you're not going to have probably a lot of minorities saying, hey, I want to be a police officer. I mean, we know that may be a challenge too. And I understand that could possibly be what's going on. But so having a structure to invite diversity is also required. So that's my perspective. But again, I'm coming from a civilian, just listening and observing what's been taking place.
Go ahead. E.
You want me to touch back on to what he's saying on this last question?
Just the question. Yeah, we didn't give you an opportunity to actually answer the question.
Okay.
So, what do you need to see happen to feel? What do you need to see happen? One, to feel safer as a police officer, and then safer as a member of the community when interacting with the police.
A while back, right, I had a conversation with a guy for Dallas PD. He used to be a training officer. He's actually Hispanic male, and he made a comment that how he used to have recruits who had never ever been in the hood, who have never ever been around minorities, or never had a relationship with a minority. So because of the area that they patrol was the Oak Cliff area, and it's highly populated with minorities, almost every day of that guy's shift, he made him get out and walk in strip malls and walk in the community. And he had that recruit, white officer who didn't have no understanding of who we are as a culture, had to go learn 5 people names and something about them. So it was basically making him go out and build a relationship with the community, but minorities in that community. So the people that he probably viewed as a thug based on their appearance, he went and he had to go and he had to approach them. He had to find out something about them. He had to, get their names, and then he had to come back to the office and to his training officer and tell him the names of the people and tell him what he learned about the people. And the training officer, who had already knew some of the people in the neighborhood, he was able to know that, hey, this officer really went in and engaged, you know what I'm saying, and got to know the people, and then just judge them off appearance or because of the area that they live in. So I think that there's one great way, a tool you can use for diversity. In addition to that, right? I think that on the application process, you can learn how diverse your candidate is and how. You may ask them to put down reference of the race. You may ask them, saying like, name a situation whereas they had to be involved and they had to do something with another race. And the reason why you want to know that stuff is because you having people that have never been around the neighborhood they're about to patrol, and all of a sudden they're in that neighborhood. Now they starting to learn us, but they learning us based off of what they knew from watching the news. So on that application, if you have stuff like that, and now there's a police academy, you know those particular candidates or rookies. So while you in the police academy, you always want to put them in situations whereas they can learn from another African American employee, or they can learn from another African American rookie. You may even put them as a lot. You may make them partner up a lot in certain situations, right? Even if it's like defensive tactics and you on the ground and you in close quarters and you putting each other in chokeholds and locks and stuff like that, right? Most of the time when people are racist, they are very uncomfortable when somebody from the opposite race is in a space. So if you put those people in uncomfortable situations, you can identify the potential racism right then and there. So diversity is very important. Also, too, have recruits or whatnot attend community functions involving blacks. If you know they don't have or minorities, you don't have to be blacks. It could be Hispanics, it could be Asians or whatnot, right? If you know they don't have a background in that, right? Have them go out to community functions that's involved in minority community. You have a lot of different mentor programs with with churches in the areas that they patrol. You have a lot of different after school programs, right? Have them go into those marking out on the community contact where they go and they get involved in the community. They get to know the community. Have them working with mentorship programs as a part of, being a rookie officer. Guess what? As a part of being a rookie officer, right? I need you, and in your area, they have this identified, in your area that have mentor programs. Guess what? You send that Caucasian officer to that area to work with those minorities in mentorship. Because what happened is, again, when they are put around us and they get to know us, one, two things gonna happen. They're gonna either be uncomfortable, and then you're gonna realize there's something wrong with this officer, or they're gonna fully engage, and then you're gonna realize, oh man, I have a good officer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think those are really good perspectives, and it kind of gives us an insight on some of the things that you can see on both ends, because you and Jacoby particularly work for, are in law enforcement. You have an understanding of the little things that can make a huge difference. Jeff, what do you feel is a way to make you feel safer when interacting with law enforcement?
Something that I had written down, and I talked about it, and it's a buzzword people are using right now, but they're using this whole defund the police. But in actuality, what they mean is just reallocating resources, right? The police, if we think about it, the police are responsible for way too much stuff. Like they responding to way too many things that maybe other entities maybe should be responding to that may not be dangerous. So we talk about myself and Dewan are in the mental health. If somebody's having a psychotic breakdown, they could be dangerous, but most importantly, officers or persons in law enforcement may not always be trained to what to look for if somebody's having a psychotic break. Just like it was a young man that had a bat. He had autism, I believe, in a Walmart. He just had a bat, and he was just having an episode, but they didn't know how to deal with him. He didn't know how to comprehend what they were saying. He didn't know what to do, and all of a sudden he gets injured because they don't have the training or the capacity to know like what to look for in situations like that. So I was saying reallocate some of the funding for it to add a therapist or a counselor on scene, or for with the mobile crisis team, there's just one unit. We need multiple, mobile crisis teams to go out in certain situations, because sometimes, like you guys talked about, some of these officers are nervous or scared because they haven't been in those communities. They don't know what those people are like. I think for everybody to feel safer, as you guys talked about, get more officers of that community to police that community. Because if you have a rapport with Officer E, you're like, oh, E cool, he's fair. I know he's fair. He's not going to do anything to me that I didn't bring upon myself. But if it's somebody that you don't know, you don't have a rapport with, I think that's the clash that we're having right now. And I think if people will feel more comfortable if they felt that officers were fair and they understood their perspective and where they were coming from. That would make the relationship between the community and the officers that much better. So that's my spiel. I know we're kind of butting up on time.
You know, the defunding the police thing, it like most things have shifted into starting to get people to believe that they're saying, like, let's totally get rid of police departments. And I think you actually hit on a valuable point about looking at the roles and responsibilities are the hats that police officers have to wear, and how those can be overwhelming, which can cause a lot of stress in their lives. Remember, police have a role and responsibility as well to make it back home safe to their families. And the more you put on anybody's plate at work, the more they're going to be feeling overwhelmed and stressed, and their ability to process information properly over time starts to diminish. When I think of some of the things that I would like to see, I remember in high school, we had Officer Kazi at Vallejo High, and Officer Kazi did a really good job of interacting with everyone. He walked around the campus all day. He walked around the community, and he had conversations. So he was fully aware of the people who were threats in the environment in which he was responsible for, as well as those who wasn't. And he did a really good job of showing a presence of a police officer who was fair, who was a leader, who students can come to and just walk up and have conversations with. I remember us having a conversation. For those who don't know, me and Jeff wanted to be firefighters, and we had a conversation in front of the office with Officer Kazi one day, and he was telling us about the advantages of joining the police department and being firefighters and things of that nature. So having police officers who are involved in the communities, I think, make a huge difference. And looking at ways to kind of weed out the officers who are showing that they're racist, whether you're looking at their arrest or who they're pulling over, you're looking at the data from that, the demographic data, to see that they're having more negative interactions with African Americans than they are with anyone else. And when we know that, we all see it on the news, a white person gets pulled over by the police and they're cussing them out, right? But those situations seem to not turn into anything violent, to where sometimes when we're doing everything right, it seems to get that way. So I believe looking at community policing as an effort to help officers understand the people that they are servicing would significantly help in the right direction. As we wind down and kind of get into our last question, guys, I want you guys to consider that in these spaces, we all have different perspectives, and that's what this is about. This show, or our opportunity to talk, is about brothers' perspectives, and knowing that a lot of this is just our perspectives. We are not people who study these things for a living. We are people who live in these spaces. We live in these environments in which the laws, the procedures, they all influence us. So we are going to definitely have perspective on these things. But with that being said, what are some things you guys are doing as individuals to contribute to the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as what are some things you'll like to see from leaders in our community? I know that there has been a big conversation about leadership or lack thereof. So kind of just in summary, what do you guys feel like you're doing as individuals to add to the movement or to support the movement? And also, what would you like to see from our leaders?
Yeah, so because the overall concept of Black Lives Matter is quite a bit to digest in itself, because sometimes people feel like, oh my goodness, I have to contribute exactly to what Black Lives Matters is doing. And so I took it as what am I doing to contribute to Black lives that I can influence within my region, or within my location, or within my job duties as a dean at the Braspective College I work at. And so it's actually, and again, I will reiterate this over and over again, it's about systematic change. Like the way things are written and the reasons why we conduct ourselves in certain spaces is because somebody wrote these things down and everybody took them as this is what we need to do. So in my opinion, it starts there. Let's rewrite or create a new narrative on what needs to happen in certain spaces. So at the institution in which I work in, we're actually looking at what barriers can we continue to remove to create more access for African American students? What hurdles can we negate so that these students can feel comfortable in this space? Again, like I was saying, a lot of where we're at wasn't created for us to be successful in education. We always did the same rhetoric. You sit in front of a professor, they tell you information, you regurgitate it right back, here's your grade. And in some aspect, that doesn't work for everybody. If you're African American and we're more of an oral kind of community, that's not always how it's going to work. Like there's other ways you need to engage with these students in order for them to be successful. So looking at home insecurities or food insecurities or even social insecurities, we have to find ways to show better engagement to have students feel more successful as well and engage in that environment. So to sum it up real quick, those are the things that we look at. How can we better inform, better relate, better engage, and to have African American students be successful? I think that's the contribution that myself as a dean in my perspective institution is doing to encourage Black lives. Again, and you'll always hear, well, what about all minorities? What about everybody else? Like all lives. And that's another thing that's like, wait. If you look at our statistical history and how data has been gathered, a lot of times when you change Black lives, you influence all the others. So when you look at civil rights, every other LGBT plus, all the other rights from all other groups came from the civil rights movement. So if you look at how you engage with Black students and you improve that, it insignificantly starts to address how other students are affected. So that's why it's important to look at the Black lives, because that in turns addresses all the other students. So that's my contribution to how Black lives are being changed.
Jeff?
For myself, being in the mental health field and then being a mental health advocate, try to do it daily in regards to just the profession and spreading awareness about the importance of mental health in the Black community. There's always been a stigma about mental health, or we had that uncle, you just lock them up in the closet, or that cousin that was just crazy, but they've had a mental health issue. So to spread information about the importance of our mental health, and if we need help, go seek help from a therapist, counselor, because a lot of times in the Black community, we use faith, and faith is very important for all of us, but we have to do faith plus something else. So we have to make sure that we're spreading that and letting people know that mental health is very important. And for myself, do that, this type of platform, do that, the one I've been in counseling, doing that through other avenues, as well as being a mentor in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. Happy to say my mentee is going off to either University of Houston or he's going to Texas Southern. So I'm really proud of him. He's doing that. He's doing really well. There's actually 3 of them that are going. Another way I'm giving back, I'm a board member of Destiny's Giving Hand nonprofit here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And what we do at this particular entity is give it back to parents that are foster parents, because there are a need for the basic stuff. Of course, CPS and the state give certain things, but there's a lot of inadequacies in regards to simple stuff, Christmas gifts, back to school supplies, all of that kind of stuff. If foster parents they supposed to have the means, but it always doesn't happen like that, because there's always more that you can give to these kids because they just don't have enough. So with Destiny's Giving Hand, we try to do a Christmas toy drive. We do like diapers and all that kind of stuff, non-perishable items. We also give back some mental health counseling for the parents, because they go through a lot of stress having kids go in and out of their homes, or getting kids that have a lot of challenges. We try to give back and do classes for those people too, as well as the items that we talked about. So that's what I'm kind of doing to kind of help in the community.
Eric?
One of the things that I'm actually doing in the community is I do a lot of mentoring, and I try to target the kids that people don't want to deal with. And the reason why I want those kids is because those kids are the ones that remind me of myself. Some of the things that I do is, I just try to give those kids hope. I try to, be a father figure to those kids. I try to be a resource to those kids. I mean, I try to instill hope, instill determination, motivate them on the regular, and also just provide, saying that sense of I love them and that I care about their life. Also one thing that I think that some of these community leaders need to stop doing is they need to stop playing politics. Politics is really killing our community. It is. Just be yourself, be honest, be open. You know what I'm saying? It's like you can't one minute be saying you godly, but then you playing politics. Because in politics, we all know they live off of perception is reality. And a lot of times perception is not reality. Because you sit back and I'm gonna use this as an example. You may see um, 16 police cars on the streets, right? Patrolling area or a city that got 700,000 people. So from a citizen standpoint, they thinking they safe because they see 16 cars, but they don't understand that for every call it's going to be 2 officers going to that call. So now realistically, no matter how minor, no matter how major the call is, it's going to probably be at least 2 people, 2 officers to that call. So the minute one call go out, guess what? 2 of those officers is taken off the streets. So now, guess what? That community only been patrolled about 14. But and that's why I say that politicians need to get out of that perception is reality crap, because it is killing our community and it's constantly killing the world. Just be straight, truthful, and honest. If police department is lacking resources, say they lacking resources, then therefore your community they need to kind of stand up and watch their own community, because the police department is understaffed.
Kobe?
I would say one of the roles I play in the movement in general is just being an advocate and a moderator. When I'm inside of the moderator enemy, when I'm inside of my settings in my police department and we're having conversations about these, mind you, I'm one of only maybe 2 or none at my department. So I have to speak for our culture and the different things that we experience so that people have a better understanding of it. But just like on the panel in front of me, outside of maybe Jeff, because we probably got this closest in skin tone and color, there's about 5 different shades of black on here, with 5 different opinions. And so my goal is that I want to see more diversity in the police departments in general so that we can help each other out. Another thing that I just wanted to close on too is that in the black community, what I need in order for us to keep advancing is stop taking opportunities out of each other's mouths and out of our mouths, right? When people see me, because everybody knows how I am, how I act off the clock and how I rock, people always say, and it always makes me happy, I never find it as a negative, they let you be the police? That right there, I love it. Because if you know me, then you know that I'm not the one that you think that they would necessarily give these opportunities to. That's why my brothers is right here laughing and cracking up, because they know how I rock on my off days and how I get down. But I say that to say that in the black community, I want more of the ones that they don't think should be in this opportunity to be on this stage with me. It's a great feeling to police with other people, other black people that have different opinions. My opinion is only one. I want the ones that think more boldly than me. I want the ones that think more reserved than me. I want Malcolm X. I want Martin Luther King. I want everybody in this circle and space to be here with me. So as a black community, we can't be out here telling our young black brothers and sisters, don't be the police or F the police. It might be F the police right now and it might be the way you feel, but I need you to come get in this with me. I can't do all of this by myself. I can't advocate by myself. And I don't want to hold the banner for what's a good or a bad cop by myself. I shouldn't be the standard. I'm just a part of what is the standard. So when you are out there and you talking to your young kids or you in the hood and stuff like that, and I want my hustlers in the hood to hear me on this one too, make sure that you don't take these opportunities away from young black men and black women, because you need them in this field just like you need me in this field. We're not your gatekeepers, but we are definitely advocates, just like you're advocates for us. Some of the best techniques I've learned on being a police officer did not come from my training in the police department. It came from cousins, family members, friends, and people that I associate with in the hood telling me tactics and things that I need, not so that I can go back and use it against people, but so that I can keep myself safe. I've learned a lot of things that have saved my life or made me be able to assess situations that I'm very proud of from hustlers. So just like I was given that game, and I know I went a little long-winded on that one, make sure that we are not taking those opportunities away from each other, man. It's very important that that's a part of breaking this barrier in this field. And I'm going to just leave it at that.
Thank you for that. And I do appreciate you guys' perspectives and the things that you guys do in the community. I think we need more faces that look like us, regular, normal Black men. You know, we're not on here with a shirt and tie on or a button up. We're just ourselves. And I think part of the Black experience that has been stripped from us is that we have to look a certain way in order to be accepted. And I think when you say that I'm willing to accept that Black man who has a heart, who wants to help simply for how he shows up, that's when we see true changes happen. I think some of the things that I've been doing individually to kind of add to the movement. I mean, Black Lives Matter movement has a couple of things that they focus on, whether it's racial injustice, police brutality, criminal justice reform, Black immigration, economic justice, LGBTQ plus, human rights, environmental conditions, voting rights, healthcare, common gun laws, education, and government corruption. I think I've focused a lot of my time on the healthcare and education. As a mental health provider, I spend a lot of time opening my doors to people who normally wouldn't be in that space and trying to make sure that they're okay through this process. I get a lot of calls of people who are struggling with racial trauma or collective trauma and trying to figure out what to do. So I'm making sure that I'm arming and providing them with resources and coping skills that will allow them to continue to go out in this world and be the best versions of themselves. Me and my boys, we have an investment group called HubAm, in which we look to add resources to the community, whether it's buying property or donating to Black-owned businesses or having toy drives, backpack drives, things of that nature, where we're making sure we support Black businesses, Black communities, and things of that nature. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Too often in our community, we think that when I go to a Black business, it has to be perfect. It has to, remember, something has to start from somewhere. So although when you're so used to going to Benihana's and they have a certain way of doing service and things of that nature, yeah, they have millions of dollars in the bank. This small Black-owned business may not have that same service yet, but with the continued support that you will have, they will continue to learn and educate themselves on how to make sure that they're offering the proper customer service. So continue to support Black-owned businesses. I think that's something that I've been doing, making sure that I'm supporting Black-owned businesses. As another thing, even with COVID, I'm making sure regardless of what restaurant I'm in or service I'm at, whether it's Black-owned or white-owned, I've been offering a tip, even in the situation where they didn't do anything for me, just a tip, because you recognize and understand that everyone's out here hurting and struggling. So I try to just be mindful of those things and try to use those opportunities to contribute. I wanted to take this time to thank everyone here for those who participated, as well as those who are listening or will listen at a later date. You can follow us on our Instagram and YouTube at Braspective. We have more videos to come. You'll see different people, different faces. You'll even see us in different spaces, because for us, being diverse, we want to make sure that there's a diverse opinions and recognize that as African Americans, we don't engage in monolithic thinking. We don't all think alike, right? We all think differently, but our experiences matter. Our lives matter, our children's, our wives, our families, we all matter. And all lives matter, right? All lives, Black lives, white lives, Hispanic lives, everyone matters. And I think that that's the message that we're trying to ensure here, is that people recognize that when you say all lives matter, that you have to include Black lives in that. So thank you, brothers. You guys be safe, and I look forward to having more meaningful conversations with you guys.